Well,
So before we start the Gemara, we're going to start with just learning some Chumash first. Because this is the parsha of Oil V'Yered, the carbon oil V'Yered. A normal chatas, you bring a behema, and you shecht it, and then you bring the dam. This is a parsha in the Torah of a carbon oil V'Yered, which is the only carbon that on these particular avonis, a person is over them b'shoigig, he brings a carbon oil V'Yered, which means it goes up and it goes down, depending on it's the only progressive carbon in the Torah. Just like in the tax, there's different tax brackets that if you're in a higher tax bracket, you have to pay a higher percentage. So the carbon oil V'Yered, if you're more wealthy, you bring a bigger carbon, you bring an animal. If you're less wealthy, then you bring a bird, and if you're two birds, two Torah. If you're less wealthy, then you bring a mincha. Okay, so we'll go quickly through this parsha. That's Svayikra Hey. There's one type of chait, someone who sees a edus and he refuses to testify. He's chayiv in the oven. And nefesh he got b'chol davar tamei. I benivlas chayet meya. I benivlas behemet meya. Or someone who touches something that's tamei, or nevela, or nevela of a chay, or nevela of a behema, or nevela sheretz tamei v'nelami menu, and he forgets about it. Who tamei ba'ashem, and he does an ashem, which the Gemara is going to explain. This means they're talking about Tumas Mikdash Ukdasha, that he's tamei and he goes into the Beis HaMikdash, or he eats kosher. Before we were talking about nevela of a chay, or nevela of a tmei, or a sheretz, or if he becomes tamei tumas meis, and he forgets about it, v'yada v'yashim. And then he finds v'huyada. We'll see what that means. He forgets and he knows. Vashim. Or a person who makes a Shavuos bitui. The different types of Shavuos. More fundamentally, we learned back when we were learning Nadarim. There are Nadarim, and where a person says something is also to me, he asks it upon himself, or a person who so that's one type of thing. And another thing is a person makes a shvua where he doesn't make that the object also, but he makes it also himself. He makes a shvua that he's going to do something, or a shvua that he did something. So Bitoy Sosayim is of that nature, where he's making a shvua about something. Either, as we're going to see in the Gemara, he makes a shvua that either I am going to eat today, or I'm not going to eat today, or as we're going to see, will be included in that, not directly. That's not what the Torah is talking about. From a drasha, also if he makes a shvua that I did eat or I did not eat. So lahara lahetiv means whether it's lahara, where he says I'm not going to eat, or lahetiv, where he says I will eat, where he says something negative. Lahara doesn't mean bad; it means something that he's not going to do. In any case, the pasuk says and he knows about it, and he forgot, and he's over on his shua. When he does one of these avonos, and then it becomes known to him that he did them, all these things he did them by mistake, and then it became known to him. He brings one of these animals as his chatas. This is why it's an oil V'Yered. If he doesn't have enough money, he brings two birds in the place of the one animal. One is a chatzah, one's a oil. What's left over from the dam, he'll push on to the bottom of the mizbech, on the foundation of the mizbech, chatas. And then the pasuk continues. And then he brings a carbon mincha. Okay, that's enough for our purposes. I don't know. I didn't make clear to you, Menachem. It's in the beginning of the art scroll, so I hope you were following along. Yeah, I forgot that I said that before you logged on.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
That's a
whatever.
lot.
But you got the gist of it.
I think so.
Yeah, so
Enough.
those are the avoinus, those are the ashamis that a person, if he does them by mistake, he brings the carbon oil of a yard. So Zak the Mishnah. Shavuos, one of the things that we mentioned in that long list was a shvua. If someone makes a shvuas bitoy, and those shvuas bitoy is divided into two that are four. So Rashi says shvuas time shein arba, b'shvuas bitoy svasayim akasav b'vayikra etzel kamer oil v'yared kamer and farish perek shlishi shtayim ksivi b'krad chsiv lahara oil hated. Like we read in the pasuk, it says so makes a shvua lahara lahated. When farish b'mishnah perek shlishi, explain later on the pasuk. We're going to go away from talking about shvua, even though that's what the name of the Masechta is. We're going to go into Tumah first, the second part, the Yediyas HaTumah. But we're going to get to it later. We're going to see that when it says Lahara Lahativ in the pasuk, it means Eichel Lahativ was Loy Eichel. If he says Lahara Shema'anes Atzmi. Lahativ, Eichel is Lahativ. If he says I'm going to eat, that's Lahativ. Loy Eichel is Lahara. If he says I'm not going to eat, it's Lahara Shema'anes Atzmi, that he's causing himself pain. So it doesn't mean bedafka that, those just are examples. And when we say shehem arba, it means to include, in addition to a person saying about the future, he's saying I won't eat or I will eat, which is lahara lahetiv, it also means for in the past. If he says I did eat or I didn't eat, that's the shehem arba, even though the pasuk doesn't directly address that. It says the pasuk only talks about the future, but the Mishnah is telling us that it also is going to be on the past. He's going to bring this same carbon oil of yared that's mentioned in the parsha that we just read. It's Yediyas HaTumah, being aware of becoming Tameh, is Shtayim Shehem Arba. The Rashi Yediyas HaTumah, Chiyav carbon oil of yared. Another thing that was mentioned in the parsha that we just read is someone becoming aware of a carbon oil of a Tumah. Machmas Tumas Mikdash Ukdashav. If he becomes aware that he was Tameh and he went into the Mikdash or he ate the kachim. Aksuva etzel shuas bitui, which is said after shuas bitui in that parsha. Nefesh kisiga v'yalfinim beperkin she'ena kasam bedaber ela betumas mikdash ukdashav shenichsas b'shoig lemikdash acha tumazeh zu ay acha basa kodesh. So that's the shtayim, someone who did not remember that he was tamei and he went into the Mikdash who he ate basa kodesh, and we say shtayim she'im arba. So we said the Shtaim we mentioned already. Zakrashi Shtaim Ksivi Dechsev Nelim Menevu Tamei Mashus Amli Menu Tuma Vayidai Oise Helam Achal Kodesh Hare Achas Oish Nichel Migdash Hare Shtaim. If he ate Kodesh or he went to the Migdash, those are the two. L'vish Ein Chayev Elam Ken Yada Betchila Shenidra Achach Nelim Menev Lacha Maisen Noidele Shechata Mishamachi Karle Yedias. The reason why he's called Yedias Hatuma is because, as we're going to clarify in this long Mishnah, is that we're talking about the only case that you bring a carbon oil of a yared is where he knew about that he was tamei prior to forgetting and then going into the Beis HaMikdash. If he never realized he was tamei, if he walked over a mace without realizing it, and then later on, after he was already in the Beis HaMikdash, he found out he would not bring the carbon oil of yared. So that's the shtayim of Tumah. And then we say Shehin Arba. So Rashi says, "Elisha Rabbis min hamikra oichne chiyum helam kodesh v'helam migdash v'zacharu es hatuma." The opposite way around, what's also included, the Shehem Arba, is rather than forgetting, he knew he was tamei, and he knew that was the Beis HaMikdash, but then he forgot that was the Beis HaMikdash, or he forgot that this was kachim, and he ate it betuma. So in those cases also, he's going to bring the carbon oil of yared. That's the Shehem Arba of Yediyas HaTumah. So then we say another shtayim sheim. Then we say Yetzias HaShabbos, back to the Mishnah, shtayim sheim arba. And Yetzias HaShabbos, being Motzei on Shabbos. If you remember back when we learned Shabbos a good couple of years ago, we said, it was the first Mishnah, we said the Torah talks about Haitzah. And we understand that to mean whether you have an ani ha'imid b'chutz, and he sticks out his hand into the Rishus HaYachid, and he takes something from the Rishus HaYachid out into the Rishus HaRabim, or if you have an usher who's standing b'fnim, and he takes something in his hand and he sticks it out into the Rishus HaRabim. Those are the two shtayim, the two cases of Chaitzah that the Torah talks about, and you chayev on both of them. And now we're done with Oil Yered. As the Gemara is going to explain, we had these two things that are mentioned in Oil Yered, and the Gemara will explain why we're talking about them after Makkos. But once we mention those two of Shtaim Sheim Arba, now we're saying general, without any direct relationship, other cases of Shtaim Sheim Arba. So the two Yitzias HaShabbos that you chayev for are when you're Motzei from Bifnim to B'chutz, depending, and both where the person is standing Bifnim or the person is standing B'chutz. And then Shehein Arba is Hachnasa, when a person takes something from outside and he brings it in. And that could be either where he's an ani standing outside and brings it Bifnim, or a usher standing inside and he brings from outside to it. And then finally, Maris Nagoyim Shnaim Sheim Arba, and that is very little about this, but the Gemara will talk about it later. Maris Nagoyim, Rashi says, you bring a Motzei has to bring a carbon to be mitarim. So we say Esu Baharis are the two Maris Nagoyim that a person brings a carbon. These are the Motzei, and then the Shein Arba is their toildus of those that are both called Sapachas, and those are the Shein Arba, one tiled of each one. Okay. So again, we had the first two, which we read from the Parsha of Carbon Oil Yered, which if anyone has to refer back to it, it's one page back in the Art Scroll. They have the whole Parsha, where it lists a whole bunch of lavim that will bring upon a person this Carbon Oil Yered. And two of them are the first two things that were mentioned in this Mishnah, Shua Shtaim Sheim Arba and Yediyas Atuma Shtaim Sheim Arba. So now we're going to go back to the second thing we mentioned, which is Yediyas Atuma Shtaim Sheim Arba. So we said Yediyas Atuma is a person who says, who knows that he's Tameh, and then he goes into the Beis Hamikdash, or he eats something that's Kodesh. That's Shtayim. And Shehein Arba it's saying, and he forgot that he was Tameh, and then he did those things. He ate the Kodesh, or he went into the Beis Hamikdash. And the Shehein Arba is he didn't forget that he's Tameh. He remembers he's Tameh, but he forgot that this is the Beis Hamikdash, which, of course, is very hard to understand how a person could do that while still being in possession of his faculties. And he already forgot that something is kachim, which is obviously a lot easier to understand. So Zok the Mishnah. Es sheyesh bo yediyah b'tchila v'yediyah b'sayf v'helam bein tayim harei ze ba'oil v'yared. The classic case that we're talking about, the shtayim that we talked about in the Mishnah, is talking about someone who knew prior to forgetting, prior to him being over on this lav, of going into the Beis Hamikdash, for example, or eating the Kodesh, that he knew that he was Tameh, and then he forgot it at the time that he was over, and then afterwards he became aware of it again. So he brings a carbon oil of Yair when he becomes aware. Yesh ba yediyah b'tchila, ve'ein ba yediyah b'sayf. However, if he was aware at the beginning, but at the end he never finds out. That means up to this point he never found out that he was Tameh when he went to the Beis Hamikdash, or he went into the or he ate kachim while he was Tameh. So obviously there's nothing you can do about it, because if he's not aware, you can't do anything about it. There's nothing to be done. But nevertheless, Soyer Hanase B'fnim V'Yom HaKippurim Toila. The Soyer Hanase B'fnim, that's the Soyer that was brought on the inside the base, inside the Kachei Kachim, that the Kohen Gadol would be Zayrik on the Kachei Kachim. If you remember back in Yuma, there was a whole process of how he did it with minchas and all sorts of things. But he brought dam in and he spritzed it on the aron, and opposite the paroiches, opposite the aron and opposite the paroiches. So that soyer that's brought special on Yom Kippur, which was actually paired, as you know, with the Sar Lazazel, that suspends his punishment for this being nichnas in the Beis Hamikdash betuma or eating kosher betuma. Until he becomes aware. Once he becomes aware, he's like a regular. Then that's the case of Oila v'Yared, of someone who had a Yediyah b'tchila and a Yediyah b'soif. So then he's v'yavi Oila v'Yared. Then he brings the Oila v'Yared when he becomes aware of it. So ein bo Yediyah b'tchila, avol yesh bo Yediyah b'soif. If he was not aware prior to going into the Beis Hamikdash. He never knew he was tamei, or prior to eating the kosher. But he finds out afterwards that first of all he had been tamei, and not only was he tamei when he went into the Beis Hamikdash. Soir hanase b'chutz v'yom HaKippurim mechaper. Every on Yom Kippur, in addition to this, the sar we talked about before, the one that came together with the Shnei Seirim together with Sar Lazazel, there was a sar that was brought together with the Musafim. That was b'chutz, like a regular sar chatos. So that is mechaper on this din. This carbon, when someone does not have a yediyah beforehand, betchila, prior to being over, he cannot bring the carbon oil of Yared, like we're going to see from Sukkim in the Gemara. The Gemara is going to prove that. So the case of oil of Yared from the parsha that we're primarily talking about over here does not apply to someone who is not aware that he was tamei before he went into the Beis Hamikdash. It has to be he knew he was tamei, and he knew he couldn't go into the Beis Hamikdash, and then he forgot and he went in. But someone who didn't have that, so he's not subject to the carbon oil of Yared. So when so if he doesn't have a yediyah b'tchila and then he finds out later, sar nasa b'chutz v'yom HaKippurim mechaper. The sar that this regular sar of Musafim, that's going to be mechaper on it. Shene'amar milvad chatas HaKippurim. The Torah says, in addition to the chatas HaKippurim, so where the Torah is being makish, the chatas HaKippurim, which was the sar hanasa b'fnim, together with the sar that's brought as a musaf, and the Torah is saying they're the same. Amasha zeh mechaper. There's a similarity between them, that they're both mechaper. They both have the same characteristic. Just like we said, the carbon oil of Yared is only mechaper on someone who had the yediyah beforehand. So too the sar that's brought b'chutz is only mechaper on someone who has a yediyah lipsaif. So when he finds out later, then it's going to be a kapara for him. He'll get a kapara from the sar of Yom Kippur and the sar and Yom Kippur itself. So far we covered two cases of yediyas hatama. There's one case of someone who had a yediyah betchila, and either it's really all one case. If he knows about it, he brings the oil of Yared. Until he knows about it, he gets a kapara from the sar bifnim, and then you have the person who had a yediyah at the end, but not before, and so he's not in the parsha of the oil of Yared. So he gets a kapara from the sar that's brought b'chutz, the sar of the musaf of Yom Kippur. Now the Mishnah continues. If a person does not realize before and that he's tamei, and he also doesn't realize after that he had done it b'tumah, he doesn't find out. Then the sar that's brought on Yom Tov, meaning that there are every Yom Tov, there's also a sar that's brought as a chatas, and that is to be mechaper on people who were metame and did not become aware of it either before or afterwards. So that's mechaper, that takes the leftovers of the people, not just the people who know about it. They already get a kapara from Yom Kippur. And the ones who do not know about it, they're not going to get a kapara from Yom Kippur. They're going to have to wait for the next regal, which is shortly forthcoming, because it's only got, 4 days between that he's not going to get a kapara till Sukkot. Usiire Rashi Chadashim. I'm sorry. Like B'Seifet B'Sirei Hagalim and Seirei Rashi Chadashim Mechaper. In addition, the Sar Reish Chodesh will be Mechaper. As soon as it becomes a Reish Chodesh, that will also be Mechaper on someone that doesn't find out about it as well. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This is all Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. So the way he sets it up, there are 3 levels of kapara you could get, in addition to bringing Olav Yared when you well, I should say there's 4 ways of being mechaper, right? If someone had a yediyah betchila, but not a yediyah, and then he gets a yediyah b'saif, so then he brings a carbon Olav Yared. When he finds out that he was tamei, that he forgotten that he was originally tamei, then he brings a carbon Olav Yared. Prior to him finding out, means he has a yediyah betchila but not b'saif. That's the Sayer Bifnim of Yom Kippur is Mechaper. If he didn't have a Yediyah Betchila, so he's not subject to Olav Yared, so then the Yom Kippur, the Sayer not of Bifnim, but of Bachutz, the Musaf of Yom Kippur is Mechaper on him. And finally, someone who didn't have a Yediyah either Betchila or Besoif, that's the Sirei Haragal, the Sirei Shchadashim, are Mechaper on him. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Shimon Omer, he agrees essentially with Rabbi Yehuda. He just has one slight disagreement. He said that there are 2 options of how you could be mechaper on someone who doesn't have yediyah b'tchila or b'saif. Rav Shimon Omer, sirei regal mechaper, avaloi sirei rashi chadashim. The sirei rashi chadashim are not mechaper on someone who did not have yediyah either b'tchila or b'saif. V'alma sirei chadashim mechaperim al hator shachal es atamei. That's talking about an entirely different case. We're talking about someone till now we've been talking about someone who's tamei, and he forgot that he was tamei, or forgot that the Beis Hamikdash was the Beis Hamikdash. Over here we're talking about someone who's tar, and he eats a kachim that the kachim is tamei. So that's what this is not even a chiv karas, and that's what the Torah is being mechaper you for. It's being mechaper you on this non-chorus lav. So that's what the Shira Rosh Hashanah, according to Rav Shimon, or at least this first version of Rav Shimon, is going to say it's mechaper. As we're going to see later in the Mishnah, there is a different version of Rav Shimon in this Mishnah, which is a whole new thing for me. I didn't know Mishnayos have machlokes and have different girsas of Tanoim. Rav Meir Omer, so that's the second shot. The third shita on this topic is Rav Meir Omer, kol ha'seirin kaparas and shava al tumas mikdash ukudashav. Rav Meir says, other than the first group, those things that are subject to the Olav Yared, that we said, the carbon, the soyer, the chatas soyer that's brought on Yom Kippur is mechaper. He says that they're all, other than that, all the other ones are all included together. That means they're all the musafim, both the one of Yom Kippur and the one of Rosh Chodesh and the one of the Yomim Tovim, which they all are mechaper, and all the different tumas mikdash ukdashav that were mentioned amongst them. Meaning that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it was mechalek into 2 separate baskets, right? We had the Shel Regalim and Shel Rosh Chodesh were both mechaper on where he had no yediyah b'tchila or b'saif, and where he didn't have a yediyah b'tchila and he did have a yediyah b'saif, we said Shel Yom Kippur b'chutz is mechaper, and Rav Shimon had said that we divided up into the one Shel Rosh Chodesh is not for aim of the yediyah b'tchila or b'saif, but rather to tell you where rather than eating while he's tamei, he ate something kachim that is tamei. He says all those things, any one of those 3 musafim could be equally mechaper on them. So kol ha-tzir and kaparas and sham al tumas mikdash ukdasha, for those tumas mikdash ukdasha that we mentioned. So now, so those are the 3 shitas that we have so far in the Mishnah. Now we're just going to reiterate Rav Shimon's shita and say it over in a different lashon in order to ask a question on it. The Mishnah asks a kasha on the shita. Hi, Rav Shimon Omer. Seir Rosh Chadash Mechaper Malatar She'achal Satame. We're going in reverse order. Rav Shimon says the Sirei Rosh Chadashim Amachaper on someone who's tar that ate tame. Right, that was the last thing that Rav Shimon said. B'shel Regalim Mechaper Mal She'ein Bo Yedia Loi B'Tchila V'Loi B'Sayf. That which is the one of Regalim is Mechaper on Tuma where he didn't know about it beforehand, but he found it afterwards, which is not subject to Oil of Yard. The Shal Yom Kippurim, meaning the Musaf of Yom, the one of Musaf Shal Yom Kippur Shebachutz, Mechaper She'en B'Yediyah B'Tchila, V'Yesh B'Yediyah B'Sayf, which again is also not subject to Oil of Yard. Amru Loi, so they asked him. So you're saying each one has a separate. This is really Reb Meir's question. Reb Meir said it's all one basket, and he said no, that the different karbanos, the different musafim, are each mechaper for a different thing. So they asked him. Amruloi, Maushi Yikravu Zeh B'Zeh. They asked him, what's the din if someone had separated, the Kayanim had separated a carbon to be used on Rosh Chodesh, and it got lost, and they didn't find it in time for Rosh Chodesh, so they got another carbon to use instead on Rosh Chodesh. This is the way Rashi explains it. They got another soyer, and they brought it as the carbon. And now, afterwards, they find the original soyer. Can you instead use that soyer to be brought on the Musaf of Yom Tov instead of doing it on Rosh Chodesh? So they answered him, Amaloi, Hayel ve'en kaparas and Shava. I'm sorry, Amalahen Yikravu. He said to them, yeah, it's not a problem. Even according to me, that I hold that they all mechaper on different things, you can bring it. Amaloi, Hayel ve'en kaparas and Shava, neich kraven zeh. They asked Rabbi Yehuda, if you hold that each carbon is mechaber for different things, how could you say it's interchangeable, that you'll bring a different carbon for something which is according to you, the carbon that's brought, let's say on Regalim, is mechaber on she'ein bo yedchil bein b'tchila b'soif, and then you're going to bring it on Yom Kippur b'chutz for the Musaf of Yom Kippur when it's being mechaber on a totally different thing, when there was no yediyah b'tchila but there was a yediyah b'soif. He says, no, it doesn't make a difference. Since they're all coming in the same general thrust, that they're there to be mechaper on Tumas Mikdash Ukdashav, they are interchangeable. You could bring something that was originally intended for one carbon, for one musaf, could be bought as a different musaf. So now, so what did we do so far? We saw the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, we saw the sheet of Rav Shimon, and we saw the sheet of Rav Meir. Now the Gemara is going to say a different sheet about what Rav Shimon said.
This last thing that Rav Shimon said is not saying that he agrees with Rav Meir?
No, he's saying, I only agree with you that they're all in one basket. Lagabi, if you lose the carbon, that you can use it for a different musaf. But he's still saying it's not going to be mechaper unless it's brought it's only going to be mechaper on what it's mechaper on. Whereas Rav Meir says they're all mixed in together. Rav Shimon Yehuda I'm Mishmai. Rav Shimon Yehuda says b'shem Reb Shimon. He says the seer of Rosh Chodesh is only mechaper on the tar that ate the tameh, which is what we had said b'shem Reb Shimon, right? Reb Shimon had said that he was disagreeing with Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda says both the soyer shel Rosh Chodesh and the soyer shel Regalim are mechaper on she'ein bo yediyah bein b'tchila b'soif. He doesn't address tar she'achal esat hatame. And Rav Shimon said, no, we have to have one of them. The Sar Shal Rosh Chodesh is only for Tar She'achal Esat Kodesh. So he's still going with that. According to this version of Rav Shimon is he's sort of splitting the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir. He's saying that they're not all entirely distinct. He's saying that the soyer of Regalim is not. He's still saying that it's mechaper on tumas, on yediyah, something that's not a yediyah betchila and b'saif. But in addition to that, it's also going to be mechaper on the lesser oven of alatar she'achal esat tameh. So he's saying it adds on each additionally more chamadika, or each thing that's mechaper on a more chamadika thing also is mechaper on the less chamadika thing that comes before. So shalruga, so mois v'leina shalrugalim shalchaper atar shachlos atami. Bal she'em b'yadia loy b'tchila v'loy b'sayf. Altar shachlos atami bal she'em b'yadia loy b'tchila v'loy b'sayf. And it also is going to be she'em b'tchila v'sayf. Mois v'leim shal yom kippurim she'em chaper atar shachlos atami. Bal she'em b'yadia loy b'tchila v'loy b'sayf. Al she'em b'yadia b'tchila al yesh b'yadia b'sayf. He'll also, on the one for Yom Kippur, in addition to the last thing, which is the one that it's added on, it also is going to mechaper on the thing that the first two, the one shall regalim and shall chadashim, it's also going to be mechaper on. Amru Loi, so they said back to the Reb Shimon, Maushi Yikru Zeh. What's the din? Can someone bring one of these? If like we said the same thing, if it got lost and now you brought a different carbon, and now you have the original carbon back, can it be interchanged? Can you use the one for Yom Kippur for Rosh Chodesh, or vice versa? Amlem, hein amruloi hem. He said hein. He said yes, you could. Amruloi imken yushal Yom Kippurim krevim Rosh Chodashim. I understand why the one in Yom Kippur should be carved on Rosh Chodesh, because it also provides a kapara. The one of Yom Kippur, we said, also provides a kapara for Tar Shachlas Atame, which is what the only thing that Rosh Chodesh is mitar. So it has a greater ambit, it has a greater reach. But it includes also what you do with the Musaf for Rosh Chodesh. So why not? How could it be the one from Rosh Chodesh on Yom Kippur? It originally was set aside for something. It only is mitar al Tar Shachlas Atame, and the one on Yom Kippur is mitar for three things. To be and something that it wasn't originally able to do. He says essentially in this version, he says the same teretz, although it's not able to be mitayr for the case the what was originally intended to be for Rosh Chodesh did not have the capacity to be mechaper on a person who had a yediyah b'tchila and not a yediyah b'sayf. I'm sorry, who did not have a yediyah b'tchila and had a yediyah b'sayf, but it's all part of being tamei mekum kedusha and mikdash kedashim, and therefore they're interchangeable. Sagt Mishnah weiter. Val zodin tumas mikdash kedashim. So until now we've been talking only about people who made a mistake. They went into the Beis Hamikdash betuma, or they ate carbon betuma with different times that they knew about it or didn't know about it. What about someone who does it on purpose? He goes into the Beis Hamikdash knowing that he's tamei. It's a big question in the Rishonim about whether this means if he does tshuva. It means if he did tshuva as well. When the next Yom Kippur comes and they bring the Ksar Nasa B'fnim, that will be a kapara for that. Now, we said before that is also the kapara for where you had a Yediyah B'tchila and you didn't have a Yediyah B'sayf, meaning the person who's going to eventually bring an Oil V'Yared, when he finds out about it, he gets also a kapara from this Sar Hanasa B'fnim. So this is the same Sar Hanasa B'fnim. Al Shar Ve'er Shabbatayra, Hakalas V'chamuras, Hasdainis V'ashkagos. The Gemara is going to explain what all these terms mean if he does it something lighter, a lav, or a more chamadika one. Zaynis, Shkagas, he does it on purpose or by mistake. We already said Zadan. Haida, v'loy haida. If he knows about it or he didn't know about it. Also, essay, v'lois essay, whether it's an essay, lois essay. Krisus or Mrs. Bezdin, whether he gets karas on it or Mrs. Bezdin. Soyer hamshaleach mechaper. Any leftover isurim, the soyer hamshaleach, the sar lazazel, that's mechaper on those. Those were not included in the previous categories. So Zakt Gemara, Echad Yisraelim ve'echad Kayan ve'echad Kayan Meshuach. And these all apply to Yisrael and a Kayan Mashiach, meaning the Kayan Gadol. The Gemara asks, but the Mishnah asks, Ma'aven Yisrael l'Kayanim, l'Kayan Mashuach. So what is the difference between a Yisrael and the Kayanim and the Kayan Gadol? So the Gemara is going to ask, what do you mean? We just said that they're all the same. So why are you then asking how are they different? So the Gemara is going to say it just means what it said, they're all the same, and it means except for in this regard that they're going to be different. Ella, sha'apar mechaper ala koyanim v'al tumas mikdash ugdasha. That there's a par that's brought on Yom Kippur, right? And that par that's brought by the Kohen Gadol, that par is mechaper on the Kohanim for whenever they go into the Beis Hamikdash, meaning they're not included in the soyer that the soyer for on Yom Kippur, the soyer lefnim and the soyer bachutz and all the different things that are mechaper. I'm sorry, I don't think the carbon oil of Yerd is necessarily included in this. No, I'm saying no, it's all of them. Yeah, Rashi says all of them. All the things that we said before, the two seirim, the sar b'fnim and the sar b'chutz, and the sar shel regalim, and the sar of Rosh Chodesh and mechaper for everyone, the koyanim are going to get kapara from the par of that the kohen gadol brings on Yom Kippur. Rav Shimon disagrees with this. Rav Shimon says, "Kashem shedam hasar nasa b'fnim mechaper al Yisrael." Just like the dam of the soyer, b'fnim, is mechaper for non-kohanim, kach dam hapar mechaper l'kohanim. So too the dam of the par is mechaper l'kohanim. Meaning, what he's trying to say with this is that there's two parts of the par. In addition to the par being brought and through being zayrik the dam, the avodas hadam, there's also a vidui that's done on that par. And Rav Shimon understands that vidui also affects a kapara. So essentially what he's saying is there has to be something that the vidui does in addition to the dam. So he's saying, so the dam of the par is mechaper on the kohanim. And kadem shevidui shel soar mishtaleach mechaper al Yisrael, just like the vidui of the what do you call it? Of the soyer mishtalech, which we said is mechaper, it's the catch-all provision that takes all the other yisurim and it's mechaper on those. Kach vidu shel par mechaper l'kohanim. So too the vidu of the par will not just be mechaper. He says it's also going to be distinct. It has to be something for that vidu to do. So it's not going to be just legabi tumas mikdash ugdashav, that there's going to be the par that helps with that, which he's saying it has to be divided into two things. The par, the dam of the par, is mechaper for the tumas mikdash ugdashav, but the vidu is going to be mechaper whatever the sor lazazel is mechaper for Bnei Yisrael. That's going to be mechaper for the koyanim. So it's going to be unlike the Tanakama, who said that the only difference between the koyanim and Yisraelim is lagabe tumas mikdash ugdashav. He says there's also a difference that instead of the vidu of the sar mishtaleach being mechaper on everyone, that's by the koyanim, it's going to be coming from the vidu on the par. Okay.
But Shimon, he starts off with the dam hasoyer and asa b'fnim.
Yeah.
Then he goes to the soyer mishtaleach. What is he?
Right. It says I simplified it. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to, if you don't.